Hey there, everybody. How's it going? Welcome back to another awesome episode of On the Throttle with Jackie Van Ham and my buddy Josh Trokey out here bringing you all of the newest news going on out here in motorcycles and power sports. To all of our dealership friends and fans out there, welcome back. And to everybody out there watching on all of our social media channels, thanks for tuning back in, bringing you all of the news every single week. As always, go ahead, feel free to hit that share button and share these shows with all of your friends that love watching and hearing about all of the newest news going on out here in motorcycles and power sports. For today's show, Josh, I have a story about Suzuki being in hot water, and I have got big news in small packages coming out of India. Josh, what do you got going on in your neck of the woods?
Hot water does not sound like a good thing the way you put that. For me, I have the question is if you are feeling lucky. And then the second one is it's Honda gets windy. Those are the two titles of the stories that I am doing today. But first, we want to thank Pengrade for sponsoring this episode. For all of your motorcycle, ATV, and UTV oil requirements, be sure to run Pengrade 1. The unique base oil cut utilized in the original green oil and the enhanced levels of anti-wear additives provide strong protection while reducing internal friction for increased horsepower output under the most demanding conditions. Pengrade 1 is proud to be made in the USA.
So as I mentioned at the top of the program, my first story for today is Suzuki is in hot water. And you're right, Josh, not the good kind. This is actually a pretty dramatic story. I was really shocked to see it, and that's why I had to, of course, bring it to you here on the program. And this is the fact that Suzuki, just within the past week or so, has been ordered to pay over $150 million with an M million dollars in damages to somebody who had an accident on one of their machines a handful of years ago. It has to do with a brake recall and a brake issue that Suzuki knew about. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump on into this story. So this past week, as I mentioned at the top of the show, the folks over at Suzuki were ordered to pay this substantial amount of money. It's ordered to pay more than $160 million to a Huntington Beach man who was seriously injured when the front brakes of his 2009 Suzuki GSX-R 600 failed as he tried to avoid an SUV. The reporting is coming from the Orange County Register. So this story is a civil case. Last month, a jury ruled that Thomas Joseph Solier should receive nearly $11 million for the crash, but another $150 million was awarded to Solier for punitive damages after his attorneys argued that Suzuki knew about the brake issues before the accident that caused the collision and did not issue a recall for the motorcycle until after the crash on June 8th of 2013. I think the message is clear. If you're putting products out on the market and you know that something is wrong, you do something about it, said Travis Davis, one of the attorneys who represented Solier. Safety is more important than profit. This is the second time a jury has found Suzuki liable for the exact same case, believe it or not. A verdict from the trial that happened in 2018 ordered Suzuki to pay Solier only $8 million, including only $6 million in punitive damages and another $2 million in compensatory damages. However, the verdict was overturned on appeal, and after they went to court for the second time, this led to the second trial with that whopper, much larger verdict. The moral of today's story is these OEMs, if they do know that a recall needs to be issued, absolutely it behooves them to go on ahead and get ahead of this and issue the recall as soon as possible. The reason I want to talk about on today's show is not only is this a shocking case with an extraordinary amount of damages, but the fact that Josh and I do bring up and talk about recalls on the show frequently, right, Josh? And we always, try to point out that when these OEMs issue these recalls, it's not meant to be a ding or a slap on the wrist. This is an issue of safety. So we want to be sure to get this information out as fast as possible. And we really try to give them thumbs up and high fives for issuing the recall in the first place. Josh, what do you think about this $160 million story?
I have no idea what the injuries are, and you can never replace a life or a lifestyle or anything like that. To me, seems a little steep. Seems like the lawyers involved were very good, let's say. The two big things that I guess I see in it too is obviously is like you said. I mean, we say recalls on here because we want people to be informed. Anyone from consumer dealership, we want to make sure that everyone is riding as safe as possible. Especially, I mean, it's funny. So many people, the first thing that they do to their bike is they try and make it faster. For me, the first thing that I do is I usually try and do suspension and brake modifications because stopping to me is the most important thing. It's wonderful. It's amazing to go fast. I'd much rather stop fast using my own brakes instead of someone else's vehicle. This, to me is a ding on Suzuki for doing this. I don't know the whole story with it, but obviously it's tough to have something like this happen and come out looking good.
Yeah. So a little bit further into the story, just only because you had mentioned it. As I said, the verdict is incredible and it is a landmark, but it is justified and in line with the purpose of the case, which the attorneys really made the argument that not only was this man pretty seriously injured, extensive leg damage, he was very seriously injured. I don't even know if he's, potentially life altering type issue or not. We can't get too deep into that, but the whole point of this case is the fact that they went to appeal, that Suzuki lost the case, but knew that they were wrong, tried to go to court again and argue the fact that they shouldn't have to pay it out. And I think that is why this case ended up being so substantial and that the damages ended up being so huge. It is meant to send a message about the fact that if companies know that something is wrong, they need to address it and be straightforward about it. So that's why I wanted to bring it up on today's show. I know that we do have a lot of dealership and OEM partners out there, so I wanted to touch on a little bit of that news that might affect them at home. Josh, what are you got going on for your first story for today?
So are you feeling lucky? And I'm not going to do a Clint Eastwood impression because you know it's going to be terrible. If you happen to like middle, or I guess I would say upper end of the middle size of adventure bikes, then you should be feeling lucky because documents have been filed with the NHTSA to bring over the MV Agusta Lucky Explorer 9.5. This is something that it is scheduled to come over to the U.S. in 2024. Obviously, with the stuff just being filed with the NHTSA recently, probably leads to 24. This debuted in EICMA back in 2021. So this is not brand new, but MV is obviously known for making their high-end, high-plush, high fit and finish bikes. With this, as a reminder, this is a 3-cylinder 950, so this is kind of a strange bird for it being that adventure bike because you don't see many triples in that, except for Triumph, of course.
Yeah.
In the styling, I mean, we talked about this before when we first saw it and talked about it when it came out with EICMA. Kajiva elephant all over this thing.
Yeah.
If you can think back to remember that bike. So this 123 horsepower, 75 foot-pounds of torque. This, this is what the two numbers that get me excited. 21-inch front wheel, 18-inch rear wheel. So you've got all sorts of options in terms of rubber, whether you want something that's street or you want something that's super duper aggressive. You have those options available to you. They do have different ride modes for this. There will be traction control. There will be ABS. There is something in the plans, from my understanding for this, that this will have eventually, not necessarily in 2024, adaptive cruise control. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about this that makes this very interesting, this bike is obviously a couple of years old now, but we haven't seen it here in the U.S. The facility or the facilitation that makes this possible is, remember, a couple of months ago, we talked about a partnership between KTM and MV, that MV is going to be able to be serviced at quite a few KTM dealerships. So that is that infrastructure now that's going to be in place in order to make sure that they can service these bikes. So now is the time to bring this over. Obviously, they've had other bikes over for quite some time, but they know us adventure guys, we are going to probably drop it. We are going to throw it at scenery. We're going to break stuff, unlike some of the other guys that ride we're going to do dumb things with these motorcycles. That being said, they wanted to make sure that they had that service set up for it, the parts network set up for it. That joint venture kind of with KTM, I see as a great way to do it. To me, it's a great looking bike. It's going to be interesting to see how the aftermarket approaches it and see what they bring to the game with this, especially here in the US. But it slots in a reasonably crowded space. It is going to be a direct competitor to me with that Ducati Desert X, which, I mean, it's MV, so that's who they aim for. So I am pretty excited to see this. I did see some information from road tests on this bike. Everyone that's ridden it so far has really enjoyed it, has liked it, and didn't find any glaring errors with it. So to me, that takes an already crowded space and gives another exotic bike in it, which I'm excited to have all this company here because it's going to make everyone better. It's going to make everyone more specialized. But in the same sense is, when do we run out of people to put in these seats? That is going to be the interesting question with this. I mean, I know you've liked this one from the start when you first saw it, Jacqui. Yeah. I mean, you'd ride this, right?
Yeah, I love the styling of this bike. I love that even off of their very first marketing moments, which you're right, was well past last year by this point now. We've been talking about this bike for a hot minute. I love that they were referencing some of their earlier days. They were referencing some of the Cagiva days. So I thought that it was really cool. I think it's a great bike. I'm excited to see it finally end up here. I love that it's a triple, super odd duck. I love that. Something different for the space. You're right, other than the Tiger, but I think that that's super cool. I'm really excited to see this with KTM owning, I believe, 25% of MV Agusta now, if I have that number correct. It definitely opens the door for MV Agusta in this country, and I, for one, am here for it. There was also a little bit of news floating around this week about a bunch of other bikes that are coming down the pipeline from the folks at MV Agusta. You know, the minute we have that breaking news, we'll be bringing it to you here on the program as always. Now, for my second story, I'm going to talk about big news that comes in small packages. But first, let's go ahead and have a word from our sponsor.
The road can throw a lot at you, but you can depend on Heidenau Tires to see you through it. Quality, made in Germany. For more info, go to heidenauTires.com.
So as promised, I've got big news and small packages coming out of India, and it's kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum of Josh's big 900 plus cc adventure bike. And these are some itty bitty and medium bitty adventure bikes coming out of India that I personally hope we end up seeing here in the United States, and I have a very good feeling that we will. My first story that I wanted to go ahead and jump into is going to be a handful of some spy photos. Today's show is all spy photos out here because they have not released any information, and this is information coming from the folks over right now, the slide on your screen. This is the collaborative bike that is going to be coming, or is coming, because it looks pretty darn finished to me, even though this is a spy pick, from the folks over at Triumph-Bajaj. That's right, this partnership that they have been talking about, dreaming about, thinking about for years and years and years now is finally coming to fruition. We all knew it was going to be a smaller displacement machine, but we weren't quite sure what that machine was going to quite look like. While this bike on your screen right now definitely has lots of goodies on it, lots of cool accessories, to me, the vibe of this bike is very kind of scrambler-esque, a little bit of like a dual sport vibe going on with it. These are spy picks, but the finish quality on this machine looks very, very high to me. So in my mind, this certainly looks like beyond a prototype type machine. This looks like something headed to production. This is estimated to be a 400cc Triumph built in partnership in India, as I mentioned, with the folks at Bajaj, maker of a literally bazillion other machines out here on the planet. They know what they're doing. They've got a good handle on it. So I, for one, am really excited to see this bike. Now, this particular bike is not really anticipated to be coming to this country. This is meant to be an India market play only. Who knows? I, for one, though, think that this is a super cool looking bike, and I would love to see a 400cc scrambler from Triumph in this country. Now, my next story, while we're talking about bikes over in India, another spy pick that has been making its way around the internet a little bit this past week. This is a bike that is going to be rumored to be coming from the folks at Royal Enfield. Let's go ahead and jump into this story a little bit. This is going to be a bike that we've been talking about for a while now. So the folks at Royal Enfield released the 400cc, approximately 400cc Himalayan, and they have had really good success with it. It's a very cool bike. Tons of like retro but off-road style. It feels like a dirt bike with a little bit more manners to it. Very, very neat machine. And for years, people have been waiting for the follow-up version of it because it is in the 400cc range. And to be honest, she is a little gutless. She could use a little bit more oomph. And just on the heels of that Himalayan, they started releasing these 650cc models, including the International 650. So the thought process is that they should be releasing an off-road scrambler-y type bike, but with the 650 platform. This makes perfect sense. Well, your wishes might be coming true because there seems to be a trademark happening right now overseas. The trademark name is the Interceptor Bear 650. Oh, sorry, 650 Interceptor International. 650. No, it's the International. Anyway, they're calling it overseas the Interceptor Bear 650 in New Zealand and the Royal Enfield Interceptor Bear 650 in India and Australia. The bear name signifies something that dwells in the woods, so an off-roader of sorts. But the name also has a 650 in it, and Himalayan 650 test mule sightings are still non-existent. So this could be a scrambler. It's already been spotted several times out in the wild, including the photo on your screen right now. Previously, there was believed to be a Scram, S-C-R-A-M, Scram 650 coming. However, I think that they are still sticking with that Interceptor or international name because it is easier to go ahead and trademark a name if you just tag a name on an existing name already. That is my understanding of it. So they're going to keep with that 650 International here, Interceptor overseas. By the way, it is called International here, not Interceptor, because Interceptor is still a name that is owned by the folks at Honda in this country. So that name is going to just have the name Bear stuck on it. And that is how they're going to designate their next scrambler bike, at least over in India and over in Australia. We're going to have to wait and see what that name looks like here. But this is another machine, Josh, that certainly looks awfully finished and ready for production to me. Do you think Royal Enfield has a 650 scrambler on the way? Is this real, or is this a unicorn, or is this just a bear?
So it's. I wonder if it can climb trees like a bear. To me, it is something that, like, I agree with you. There is a certain amount of polish to this that does make it look not prototypish, more like, okay, this is what we're going to the show with. To me, they had so much success with the Himalayan. They've had so much success with these platforms. They have found their niche in the market. And this fits well within that niche of the market. So to me, it's a no-brainer for them to do this. Will they do it? I'm pretty sure. But of course, until we see it on dealership floors, we've both been disappointed by dream bikes that we have seen. We're like, oh, I can't wait to get my hands on that. And suddenly it's a unicorn, or it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. To me, I agree with you. They need to do this because with the Himalayan, there is a desire for a little more oomph. And this would provide some of that for those people.
It would. The one thing I will say, though, is that this definitely leans way, way, way harder into that kind of cafe racer look of that 650 Correct. International 650 Interceptor, depending on what side of the pond you're on. This is really heavily leaning into that, and it's definitely a step away from the Himalayan styling, which I was a little surprised to see. That being said, though, I think the bike is super sick looking. I love the very like retro cafe racer Triumph-esque almost vibes that this has going on, and I am super excited to see it. I can't wait to see it show up in this market because I have a really sneaking suspicion that it is going to. Now, Josh, What do you got going on for your second story today?
So the title of my second story was Honda Gets Windy, which seems weird, but If you go back to 2019, I'm getting my years mixed up here. They all feel the same. It was pre-COVID, so 2009, 2019, they're the same thing. You can find patent drawings that were submitted from Honda for a supercharger setup for their motorcycles. So why is this news now? And you can see parts of it I've highlighted here in red. More items have been filed recently, and they are actually much more specific in terms of the filing. So it's rather than general supercharger patents, they're actually looking at patents on a number of pieces to make this work. The big deal with this is showing on the 1100 engine, which is used in the Rebel, the NT 1100 touring bike, and of course, my favorite, the Africa Twin. So there's always, when you look at stuff like this with superchargers, you think, the only thing that you're going to think about really is going to be the H2. Why would they go with a supercharger on this? And there's been some speculation. There's been a lot of talk. And I see a number of things that I kind of like with this. One is Honda's down on power. When you look, they are down 30 horsepower compared with BMW and the GS. Now, the Africa Twin is their flagship. They're down 30 horsepower on the BMW GS. They're down 65 horsepower on the Ducati, which that's 65 horsepower is more than a lot of motorcycles make to begin with. So that's
two Royal Enfields.
Correct. Right. So that is a lot of power to be down with on that. So this is a big power adder. Great idea for when it comes to that. Now, why wouldn't you use a turbo? With turbos, there's the issue of lag. There's the issue of getting rid of some of that at the heat, the way they dissipate the heat, things of that nature. This would be a great way for them to add a lot of power to this bike while maintaining the emissions. That is the big thing. When you can stick more air in there and you can get some more fuel in there per stroke, you're going to end up with a more efficient and therefore more clean burn. Obviously, the more efficient you can make an engine, the easier it is to get it under those emission standards. So that is what they're looking at with this, we're pretty sure. Obviously, to get a power boost while keeping it under emission standards, as especially those get more strict and more strict every year, that's what they're looking at. So why haven't others done this? Obviously, it's just on the H1, which is, it's all about cooking your rear tire on a dyno or just going to the drag strip and embarrassing people. The complexity and weight that this adds to a motorcycle is obviously a big deal. You can do most of these pieces in aluminum, but you're still going to add a fair bit of chunk to this. Not to mention, you're adding a fair bit of volume to that engine setup, meaning you got to find a place to put that. The other thing that's very difficult to manage with superchargers is pre-ignition. Anytime you compress air before you shove it in the cylinder, you are making that engine more susceptible to pre-ignition and more susceptible to putting parts of the piston out the exhaust. So those are the big reasons why not to go with this. So it's one of those things where it's interesting to look at. Now, some of the ways that you can prevent some of the pre-ignition that people have talked about and mentioned, and that Honda actually has some interesting information out there about, is direct injection. Now, once again, direct injection is great because instead of it injecting the fuel into the airstream for it to get compressed, the fuel isn't injected until the piston is basically close to top dead center, almost like what a diesel does. When you do that, you're adding a whole boatload of complexity to that fuel system, and you're also having to add low and high pressure fuel pumps. You have to have 15 to 20,000 PSI of fuel pressure. So now we've got to take an engine and make it drive that fuel pump for that. There's a ton of complexity with it. My big thing with this article and seeing this is Honda is pushing this. Honda is known for their reliability and stuff. And I doubt that they're going to change for that. To me, that makes this super interesting, that it shows Honda is trying to push this technology forward. Where are they going to take it? Where are they going to end up with? And to me, this is this cutting edge stuff that is so interesting to talk about, because we're probably going to see it in the next few years, but in what form? What are your thoughts, Jacqui? Do you want to hear that bad power steering pump noise when you rev your bike?
Man, I am a sucker for the sound of a supercharger and or a turbocharger. I am here for it. That is a yes for me. Supercharged motorcycles is one of my most favorite things. I love the idea of a supercharged engine. Lord knows it could stand it. I had no idea. Down 65 horsepower.
It's a difference.
No. Yeah, they're gonna have to do something for sure, and that would definitely add a little bit more rock and roll to that engine. Which who doesn't like a little bit of extra rock and roll? Who doesn't want that on their bikes? So I just want to correct misspoke. I thought that as I was back to the Royal Enfield story, I said it's called the International in the US. It is not. It's called the INT 650. That is all they call it here in the US. I thought it stood for international because they cannot use the Interceptor name. I was wrong. So eat me alive in the comments. It's fine. I'm going to correct myself now before we wrap up today's program. But anyway, it's the same bike. It just has a different name on this side of the pond, the INT 650. Anywho, the last thing I wanted to leave today's program with is that this weekend, if you are watching and you're out on the East Coast side of the United States, I will be at a super cool motorcycling event. It should be my last slide, Miss Ashley. If you've got it, there you go. At an event called the Lost Highway Motorcycle Show and Concert. It's motorcycles, it's music, it's a beautiful part of the planet. It is in the Poconos, which is over to the eastern side of Pennsylvania, kind of in between New York City and Philadelphia. Very, very cool. I'll be there all weekend. I would love to see you. If you come on out and you watch today's show and you stop by and see me, come say hey. I always love seeing you guys out there. As always, you can go ahead and say hey to us in the comments. Feel free to pick on me for having the wrong name today, or yell at Josh because he's always talking about nerdy stuff. Whatever you want to do, leave it in the comments. We always go back through. We always go back through and read them and peek in and say hey. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Have an awesome week. I will see you next week when I get back from the Poconos. Ride safe, everybody. See you next week.